Hello, I'm Wes, also known as the Explosion, and this is the second episode of The Backlog. We have 4 games to talk about this week, so let's get right to it. First game we started with was Sonic Colors. Now, I had previously started playing this game through with my brother, but there was a certain point in the game that required like a fast reaction time that I couldn't just get down 100%, so I got frustrated and put it on hold. I came back to it this week and I got frustrated again. I started playing some of the other levels, and like the thing with Sonic games are like even in the best of them, a lot of times they have trouble deciding what they want to be. There's points like this where it's just hold forward, go really fast, doesn't really require a whole lot. Then there's other times where they want you to carefully navigate a bunch of frickin', tiny platforms with Sonic's butter shoes. By which I mean shoes that play like there's frickin', like really slick, really slippery, really just tricky. I don't know why they do it. So, they add the extra factor in this of the Wisp, which are just dumb little extra superpowers you can use that some of them are pretty simple, some of them are less than intuitive. Like, I don't know. You get various mileage on each of them. But yeah, as you can see right there, I got a Wisp and just didn't want to use it because I hate using the laser. I don't know why. I think I had a few bad experiences the first time I played it, but I just hate it. So I got frustrated and I decided that I was not going to play any more Sonic Colors. Then, once I got done with my games for the week, also, why can't you dive bomb those things? There's nothing to indicate that those in particular are not dive bombable. But when I got done my games for the week, I realized that I didn't record anything for these portions of the video. So I went back and decided to play a few frickin' extra levels. And when I played those, I actually was managing to get some things accomplished, and it made me rethink the whole thing. Do I really want to just not play Sonic Colors anymore and to give up on it? And the answer was no, I'll give it another shot. So, despite playing this and being finished with this, I have decided that I'm not quite as finished as I initially was. So, Sonic Colors will go back on the list. I'll probably talk about it when I actually do get through it, for better or worse. Oh, and one last thing worth mentioning that I almost completely forgot about. The reason why I was able to beat one of the stages that I couldn't beat before, at least what I imagine it was initially I was playing with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, which pretty much all wireless controllers have at least a little bit of input delay. When I went back to that part with a freaking GameCube controller, it took me 2 tries. The first one helped me get my bearings. The second time, I just did it. I did like 2 of those like QuickTime event things in a row. And so, yeah, pretty much what I'm saying is anything that requires reflexes and careful button presses, don't use a wireless controller, at least not until they get their crap together with this. Now we come to the bane of my existence, Sonic and the Black Knight. Why I decided to play 2 Sonic games in 1 week, I don't know, but that's my mistake. I have only myself to blame for my own suffering. This game has a surprising amount in common with The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Both are on the Wii. Both contain swordplay that you control with the Wii remote, but is wonky enough that you can't quite do what the game expects you to do, at least not as well as they expect you to do it. Both the swords have sentience. They're both alive and will talk to you, although admittedly Caliburn is a lot less annoying than frickin' Fi. And both have a character that almost makes the entire game palatable, but not quite. They're still both hot garbage, and I will fight you on that. Now, this game, I believe, came out 2 years before Skyward Sword, so I would almost say that that game took inspiration from this, if it were not for the fact that Zelda games typically take like 5 or so years to frickin' complete, unless you're doing something crazy like reusing assets like in Majora's Mask. But that's getting a little technical and not really that important to the conversation. Anyway, I have a hard time deciding which game is worse because, spoiler, I didn't finish this. I got frustrated and I gave up. But at the same time, if I were to continue playing, I still think I could just struggle and muddle my way through it a lot faster than Skyward Sword took. So, what's worse? The game that's playable but will take up a lot of your time, making you miserable, or the game that is a lot worse mechanically, is just so unpleasant and borderline unplayable, but will only waste a few hours of your time. And as an extra little comment here, like, what is happening in this cutscene? This is like the intro cutscene. Like, these characters are very clearly Knuckles, Shadow, and Blaze, but in armor, but they're masked up like it's supposed to be a mystery on who they are. But, like, each character's design is so distinct that if you don't recognize these characters with the mask on, you're also the type of person that wouldn't recognize them with the mask off. So I don't know what the point is. Though as for the story itself, there's a wizard. She summons Sonic to fight King Arthur, who has gone crazy and evil and extra bad. And Sonic needs to get the magic sword powers to be able to actually hurt him because he's literally invincible. And that's pretty much the story. The gameplay is pretty much as you see. You run around, you swing a sword, you do it by swinging your Wiimote. Like, it doesn't play well, and there's like enough lag between sword strikes that you can't just rip through enemies too often unless you're doing this one special move that you have an energy gauge for, so it's not something you can spam. I'm not sure if it was so that you would more carefully select your sword strikes, or if the game just thinks that if you swing around too much that you're still on the last swing, and thus you wouldn't want to be swinging again, but it's pretty awful. And, I mean, there's different types of missions. This one here is reach the goal, which there's nothing too fancy with that. Like, a lot of times it's just easier to, instead of fighting the enemies, just bypass them by jumping over them. Normally by doing a sword attack, because that keeps you in the air a little bit longer. And if you happen to get too close to an enemy, sometimes you'll clip them and then they won't be able to sucker punch you afterwards. There are other missions where you have to perform specific tricks, which isn't that fun. And then there's, like, still other ones where you have to, there's, like, the little gremlin guys that are supposed to be villagers. You collect rings, which, rather than getting hit and losing all your rings on this game, it's worth mentioning, you'll just lose 20 rings. They're more like HP than they are stinking, how rings function in the past. But for some of them, you do this little thing where you collect rings and then you distribute the rings to the little villager, Baby Yoda looking hooded guys. And that's by talking to them and then doing a series of button presses, which I guess the button presses, like, you don't just give them the money. It's like you're having a conversation or whatever, so it's a little weird. I mean, I guess it's another little thing that you can do, another little activity, adds variety, but it's not, like, what I'd say super fun, but nothing in this game really is. Like, on the plus side, most of the levels don't take too long to beat, so it's not too much of a slog typically. But, that's less gameplay you have to go through should not really be a selling point, so I can't really consider that a compliment in its favor, Another thing about the levels, they reuse a lot of the same stages and either just add more to it, like let you go further into the level, and or just swap around where certain enemies and obstacles are. So I don't know, that's it's a little lame having to play the same thing over and over again, especially something that isn't really super fun like this game. You also collect treasure and identify it at the end of the mission. Some of them can be used to give yourself special abilities to help you through maps, and others, I don't know if I'm just missing where you use them, but I can't figure out how. You can also customize your playstyle to be either balanced, speed focused, or power focused, but I don't think this game is good enough to warrant that extra level of complexity. Like, I don't think anybody is going to be playing this to death where, they get everything perfect and have their perfect loadout. But I could be wrong. There could be some hardcore fans somewhere. Now, what got me to actually rage quit this game as opposed to when I played Sonic Colors and decided that it was worth giving another chance? There were so many times I felt like quitting this game, but I just didn't. Some of the initial missions where they were tutorials, like, I thought I was doing the prompt, but I wasn't quite doing what they wanted me to do, but I think that came down to me not paying enough attention to some of the, some of the UI on the screen telling me what I needed to do and how many times. So yeah, right as I was about to give up on one of those, I won, so I decided I'd stick with it. Then I got to the first boss, Sir Lancelot, as played by Shadow the Hedgehog. I could not figure out how to beat him, so I just ended up flailing a lot. Kinda like what I did with my sentence there. And just as I was about to give up, I got a lucky break and I managed to take him out. After that, I just kinda muddled through it. A lot of it wasn't fun, some of it was a pain in the butt, but nothing was game-ending. When I got to the third boss, I actually figured out kinda what I was doing. Blaze the Cat playing Sir Percival, the best character, obviously. But yeah, like, I got to that and I thought, you know what? I think I'm figuring it out. I think I know how the game wants me to play it. I think I'll be able to beat it. I'm gonna beat I'm gonna beat King Arthur, and then I hear there's some stuff after that. I'm gonna keep on playing. I'm gonna actually beat this game. And then I got to this fight. This fight that in the beginning, I didn't even know how I was supposed to beat it. They kept on saying, get in close and attack. I kept on running faster, and I just couldn't get along front of him and able to hit him. I needed to watch several videos before it was finally made clear as to what I'm supposed to do. And then I needed to, trial and error to figure out a few other pieces that I'm missing. But eventually, I got here. I got to this fight. I knew how to activate this, I don't know, are we going to call it a QuickTime event? Which, let me tell you right now, the game sets you up for failure just with that. Because if you can see when I was attacking him, his sword glows and there's a sound effect, and then it shows the Wiimote wiggling. You don't want to attack when the Wiimote is wiggling. If you do that, you're already too late. You want to attack him when his sword glows and you hear the prompt. So, already, the UI on this, it's shit. The visual tells they're shit. So, yeah, this is already a bad thing. Then you get to the last, there's like, at least as far as I can tell, there's 2 stages to this. There could be a third after it, but there's the initial one that I'm able to get through. Then there's this stage. And you have to figure out that you need the red bar in the beginning to be able to properly react to this. The timing is different each time. Like right there. There are some attacks where you need to wait for him to start his attack, and then there's other times where they want you to already be attacking before he starts his attack because there's that much of a delay in when your attacks go out. This is awful. This is horrible. I hate it. I hate this song. I would not recommend this game really to anyone. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the Night on the Wind theme, but that's about the only nice thing I can say about this. Oh, that and Blaze the Cat is in it. If you're a Sonic the Hedgehog video game collector, get it for the shelf. Do not play it, at least not more for a few minutes for just, curiosity's sake. Now we come to a game that I actually really enjoyed, No Straight Roads. I played this for the Switch, which was probably a bad idea because I'm told that this is the buggiest version of the game, and there were a few points where the game did act a little wonky, but I still managed to get through it, so it was nothing game-ending, at least in my experience. I hear the Switch version also has some extra functionality, but I don't think I use that because when I was asked for the one option in the menu, it only gave me a picture rather than a text explanation. So I wasn't sure what it was asking me, and I just decided don't bother. But like I said, I enjoyed this game, so let's get into the story and setting. In this world, music is converted into power, electricity, which also converts into social power. Zook and Mayday, the two playable characters, are rockers, and they go on to a talent show which is run by like the head honchos of the music world that favor EDM, a type of electronic music. They get rejected despite a warm audience reception, and afterwards they pitch up a fit and Rock is just banned outright. They, of course, don't think this is very fair, so they decide to overthrow those at the top by hijacking their shows and beating them in battle. The characters are very stylized, and they remind me a lot of a bunch of old Nicktoons shows, and their personalities are also just like a lot of fun. I really enjoyed interacting with them. The bosses themselves attack in tune with the background music, and you, on the other hand, just can run around and maneuver and smack things with a basic combo, use specials, or transform certain parts of the environment for a limited amount of time in order to get some assistance, like transforming a random prop into a turret to get some chip damage off. This game also has a unique ratio of level and boss battle, where I'd say each chapter is about half stage and half boss battle, which is a pretty even ratio. I don't know of too many games that, do it this skewed, which is actually kind of fun. A lot of the bosses have very cool designs. They have, like the whole game has pretty good music. And it's just fun getting to the different stages of it rather than just slogging through a bunch of shitlings, more or less. There's also a hub world where you can interact with various characters to get some flavor text and learn maybe a little bit more about the world. You can find batteries which you use to repair certain, structures around the world, which make the, in-world people happier. And you can also find various one-use power-ups, which I never use because I'm the type to hold on to my, items just in case I ever really need them. Final boss, that's not enough of a reason to break out these bad boys, no. There's also some light RPG elements. As you progress through the game, you get extra special attacks that you can use to customize your character. There's also a skill tree that you build out by gaining followers. And the way you gain followers are either by completing the levels and getting a high score, by fixing things around town, or there's also this one system where you can do phone interviews, where that'll, depending on how you answer, you'll get more followers. So that's kinda neat. Oh, and another thing worth mentioning, this game doesn't use the life system. Instead, if you lose, they give you the option to go back to a checkpoint, which are spaced out very fairly, and you'll just take a huge hit to your score. This makes the game a lot more accessible. I think most skill levels will be able to beat the game without too much trouble with this setting. And it also, I think, adds some value to the game, because if you messed up and used to continue on some of these bosses, maybe later you'll decide that you want to go back and replay a boss, which it gives you the option to do that at any time, and that way you can get a higher score and maybe get more followers and make yourself even stronger. So that's pretty neat. I know I myself, there were, I'd say about half of the bosses I needed one continue for, with the final boss requiring multiple continues. I feel like I would have gotten very frustrated having to redo the entire, the entire level start to finish, especially with that final boss having to start over again and again and again. So this was a great function for it, and you know what? I am thinking that at some point I do want to go back and try and experiment and see if I can get, a better perfect run on any of these guys. Or at least a no continue run. Overall, I just really love this game, and it left me wanting more, which does bring us to the one major caveat of this game, and I'm not talking glitches. Game length. Now, this is a $40 game, and it took me about 5 hours to beat. So unless you're the type who will replay a game again and again for a high score, or this seems like the sort of game that you'll play again and again with different modes, different difficulty settings, maybe with different sets of friends since there is a 2-player mode, this might be a very hard sell at that price. I myself picked it up for, I believe, $20-some when it's on sale, so that might be my recommendation. Put it on a wish list and wait until the price sounds right for you. Or if this doesn't seem like your type of game at all, I wouldn't not recommend looking up a Let's Play of it. I think the story is at least worth experiencing once. I think it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of sites that are worth seeing. I'd also be willing to throw more money at it if somebody was willing to sell me a soundtrack. Maybe that's something that the Steam version has. I'll have to look that up later. But that's no straight roads. I had a ton of fun with it, and I'm gonna say that it was the highlight of my week. This brings us to the last game for this week, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest, which was not on my list. I was just playing it for fun with a friend online, but we finished it, and I think it's worth talking about. The Super Nintendo was the first console my brother and I owned, so Donkey Kong Country was a very important series to us, and Diddy's Kong Quest was my favorite of the three. I'm probably biased because this is the game that introduced Dixie Kong, which is one of my favorite video game characters, and whenever Dixie Kong is playable in a game, I will refuse to play as anyone else. And oh man, this game is so much rougher than I remember. It is a lot more difficult than it needs to be, sometimes by design, by throwing things in like mechanics that you will only use for one level, maybe two, but you need to master right now. Some of it is by throwing enemies that you need to immediately react to that you can't see because they're off screen, which, if this game were converted into widescreen instead of just the very limited full screen, the game would be 30% more playable, I swear. And then some of them are just very questionable design choices. Whoever replaced Winky the Frog with Radley the Snake should be shot. Winky is what you want in a platformer game. He has a horizontal hitbox, which is good for jumping on enemies. Radley, on the other hand, has some weird jump mechanics and has a vertical hitbox, which is good for splatting into things like a bird into a glass frickin' door. All that said, the music is still great, the character designs are still cool, and there's a lot of fun to be had here. It's just not the absolute perfect gem that I remember, which is a little disappointing and makes me a little wary about moving on to Country 3, but we'll see how it goes. I also did a few other things of note this week. First, I created a playlist for myself to listen into the car with vocal tracks. That way I can sing along and possibly increase my lung capacity, because I'm asthmatic, and we're in the middle of a pandemic that affects the respiratory system. Hooray for trying to live! I also finished The Lost World, the novel sequel to Jurassic Park, which was a lot better than the Jurassic Park book. The first one had a lot of contradictions in it, where they would tell you one fact about some of the creatures, and then they'd have it do something else that flew in the face of what they just told you, solely because it was cool and exciting. This one, it made a lot more sense. I thought it was just better written overall. It did make me notice something, though. In pretty much all of the Jurassic Park movies, and now in both of the novels that I've read, there's always one, sometimes two, children characters. This is just weird. Like, is it supposed to give a self-insert for the children reading this book? Because most people suggest for children a book about adults being brutally eviscerated and eaten by dinosaurs. I mean, it could also be because sometimes they explain complex scientific stuff, and if you're sitting around with a bunch of scientists, none of them are going to need it explained, so the audience is on the same page. They can explain it to the children, and that way nobody feels dumb about it. But it just creates, like, a sense of disbelief because they're here telling you dinosaurs are the most deadly creatures and hunters that ever walked the earth. If you find a dinosaur, you're probably dead or whatever. And meanwhile, they get outmaneuvered by a bunch of children. Children who don't have fully developed musculature, and maybe they don't also have frickin' all the experience necessary to be able to get out of these tight situations. But somehow they're fine. They're always the ones that are fine in any of these things. I don't think a child has died once in any of the franchise. The other thing I did was create a burn list, which is just a note that you leave for somebody after you die to get rid of everything you don't want found. For more nefarious people, this would be things like scrubbing their meth lab, getting rid of their prostitution ring and any evidence that it ever existed, or utilizing their blackmail to make sure that all their wishes were carried out after their untimely passing. For me, though, it's maybe half a page of, "This is where I keep my porno stash. Please dispose of it before my parents find it after going through all of my stuff. Post-mortem." So, nothing too exciting, but it's one less thing to worry about. And isn't that super important in this day and age? So we're focusing on the Nintendo part of the list because that is really the only thing I cleared this week. One less Switch game, bringing it down to 34, and one less Wii game, bringing it down to 7. That brings us down to 140 games on the list overall. It's not much, but it's something. Given that this is supposed to be the crux of the whole frickin' series here, I wish I had more to say, but I really don't. I'm down to 140. It's progress. Not a lot, but a little. So at this point, I guess I'm just going to sign off. Thank you for watching, and suggest maybe hitting subscribe if this sort of video interests you. I'll be back again next week with hopefully at least one more game ticked off the list.